On this episode of Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered, we sit down with Jack Miller, President and CEO of T360. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff in the Swanepoel Trends Report. Let's dive in. You talk about it privately, we talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. Welcome again to the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, James Dwiggins, along with my co-host, Keith Robinson, aka Crazy Uncle Keith.
What's up?
Take it away, Keith. Tell us, what are we going to be talking about?
Today we have Jack Miller from T360, and he's going to be unpacking some of the findings from the Swanepoel Trends Report and digging in with us on some of his observations about what is happening today and tomorrow in residential real estate.
That is the Bible of trends in real estate. It's been going on for almost 20 years, I think. I mean, somewhere around there. So it's going to be awesome. Tune in. Jack, welcome to the show. We are super excited to have you here. For our audience and listeners, I'm really excited to have Jack because I've known him a long time. He is an industry veteran who has more knowledge on this business, both historical and forward-thinking view on it than most people I know in the business. Jack, tell the listeners a little bit about your background, just real quick, and we'll get into the more important stuff. But just a little bit of background on you and the company you work for, and some of that, so they have a little bit of context.
Well, Keith and James, first, thank you for having me. It's always. I mean, we have great conversations outside of being on a podcast, so I'm really glad to be able to bring that into a podcast with your audience. It's a lot of fun. I'm entering. This is my 22nd year in the industry. I have worked for a national franchisor in management. I've both owned franchises as well as run an independent brokerage with some partners. I've sold real estate. I've kind of done a lot of different jobs in the industry.
Yeah.
Principally a technology person. I came out of technology industry. I worked for Dell and a few other startups in the 90s, and then was fascinated by real estate and was recruited into, by Gary Keller and his team to build their national organization. And
nice.
And then the last 10 years, I've worked closely with Stefan Swanepoel and the T360 organization. We've built a larger management consulting organization. We do a ton of trends research. I was just sharing before we got on that, we're in our 18th edition of the Swanepoel Trends Report.
Which is, by the way, it's like the Bible of the future of the industry for those who have never actually spent time reading it. So it's pretty damn amazing. We're going to cover some of that today as well.
Yeah,
so.
It's how I learned where the industry was headed when I ran an independent brokerage. Was from the Trends Report. And I've written now for 10 years of the Trends Report and have been involved in the thinking and the whole group that does the research. So we got lots to share today. I'm excited to dive right in.
Well, let's just start there, right? So, this is a report that I can say that, I read every year and have for, I don't even know how long, probably since it's been coming out. And it's always fascinating to see all the things that, here's the things we're watching. Here's what we think is going to happen. What percentage of that stuff, by the way, because I always listen to, people talk about it, came true? Do you guys have a track record of
That's really good.
Is there a scorecard? I want the scorecard.
That's a great question. So I think we are really strong at looking at what's going to happen and saying it's going to happen.
Sure.
The trick has always been how soon.
Sure.
How soon. So there's a lot of things where it's we wrote a lot about transaction management. We wrote a lot in the very early years. Stefan did a lot about the move to digital.
Sure.
And it's taken 20 years.
Yeah.
He was writing about transaction management in '99 and saying, "Hey, this will become the way the industry works." And honestly, it's probably been up until just 3 or 4 years ago where it really felt like if you're in a national brokerage firm or a local firm, you probably have a transaction management platform.
Yeah.
Business. So I think that's the trick. I don't know that we're 100%, but I think if we're not pushing ourselves to challenge the thinking of the reader, we're not doing our job.
Well, you guys also do so much research on these subjects. So I mean, I know it's not just doing a little bit of stuff and then writing an article. I mean, you guys spend a long time, you know.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about the difference between why we call it a trends report versus a blog or an article or news or whatever it is. Is we every year we get our team together, and we have now about 40 people that work for us that consult in all different areas. MLS, association, technology, brokerage, franchise, recruiting, events, like everything that touches the industry. We have business leaders that have been doing it for a long time.
Sure.
And we ask them, what's impacting your customers right now? What do you see coming? Like where they're all working with clients. We're talking to clients all the time. What do we see that's coming that we think belongs on the executive agenda in real estate? And that's our filter. It's like, if you are running a brokerage company or a national organization or an MLS, like if you're an executive or on the management team, what do we think you should be aware of, talking about, building into your strategies and plans? And if it's not at that level, then we don't put it in the report. And there's sometimes we'll have we have had topics that we've said it's not ready yet. It doesn't belong on the executive agenda. It's not fully baked yet.
Not mature enough.
Sure.
Enough. So we put it off. So that's what it is. And then there's about 2,000 hours of research put into that. I think that's like a whole working year of research across the research team that goes into the publication every year. And I just tell people, look, we do not claim. Now, you have to be smart to do this kind of research, but we don't claim to be smarter than the smartest executives in our industry. The executives in the industry are really smart. But what it is we dedicate that task. The hours. We go, okay, look, we know the industry. We've got some smart people to work for us. And then we tell them, go study hard. Lock yourself in a room and study hard on what we think is going to happen. And that's the difference. That's the job. That is the job that they do, which most industry executives, you maybe have in your working year, I don't know, maybe 20 to 40 hours of research time that you can do over the course of a year.
Because you're running a business.
Maybe you're 100 if you're really studious, but you only have so many hours to do research and to come up with your own perspectives. And so we just accelerate that by doing the research for people.
So let's dive in then. Give us, I want to dive into a lot of stuff. It's a very different time in real estate than it's been since the last downturn. So let's try to get through what you think are some of the most important trends that are going to affect even this year or beyond the real estate industry. And then we'll dive deep into this stuff because I'd love to hear your take on it. So
I will. I'll set a little bit of backdrop and then we'll take it to right now.
Okay.
Right? A little bit of backdrop. We're in what we call the 10th stage of evolution of our industry.
Okay.
Our industry. And
that sounds fancy.
Yeah. This phase is acceleration. The prior phase was capital. So we had about 8 years where, several $1 billion a year was coming into our industry, capital, new business models, all that kind of stuff. With a lot of money was being put into those. Prior to that was an explosion of technology in our industry. You can see that in the early 2000s and IDX, Zillow, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the phase we're at now, we call acceleration because it just means things are happening faster. So that's kind of the mega trend backdrop. And I could go through all the other phases since the 1950, but it's a little historical in purpose. But that's where we are. That's why things are moving so fast, because we've had capital introduced on top of technology, and now it's moving quick.
Jay, is that the good and the bad accelerating? Or I don't want to put labels on things, but does that mean just everything across the board, the positive things, the negative things, the hard things, the easy things, everything is beating?
It mostly means that things that used to take a long time in this industry to happen are happening much, much faster than they were before. And just in the last 5 years, guys, there's some huge things that happened. For 18 prior years to this year, NRT, Realogy, Anywhere's brokerage company, I think it's Anywhere Advisors now, was the largest by every metric, agent count, all that kind of stuff. Well, what's happened in the last 5 years is it's flipped.
Sure.
It's no longer, so it's come over. 10 of the top 20 companies are companies that were founded after 2000. And so that's what acceleration looks like. And they're moving up in terms of size. For a long time, you guys have been in the industry a long time. For a long time, it's like, hey, it's going to be, Realogy now Anywhere. It's going to be Home Services, Berkshire Hathaway. They're the Goliaths. And everybody was missing a zero in terms of sales volume. They just weren't even close to the hundreds of billions of dollars that these guys did. Now, that's all changed. And so that's a result of the acceleration.
Do you attribute that to technology? Like, why did it take us 20 years to get transaction management software fully adopted, and now things are changing? It's
a great question. I think that in the adoption of the internet and communications technology, and really the proliferation of the information age, now stuff doesn't just happen in one state. It now goes national really quickly. How many national publicly traded brokerages have been started in the last 6 years?
Sure.
It's a lot of it there, and there will be more. If you're starting a thing and you're like, I'm going to go big, you don't hang out in one state for 20 years building.
Right.
That's not how
scale.
People we're able to scale more quickly now. Technology is a massive enabler, but so is capital. Those two things are massive enablers. So those are mega trends that are kind of driving the action.
Do you think that there's some relevance to, as I'm listening to you talk about this, the fact that it was 2011 we hit bottom for realtor population at 1 million roughly, and now we're at, obviously 1.6, going to keep coming down a little bit now, but like that also drove part of this change. And I'm going to second that question with another piece that, and this is just my personal opinion, but I feel like there's been a drive down in value by brokerages, which then drives down comp. And so it's like you see everybody talking about split all the time. So I feel like there's been a lot of these new companies coming on. They're less expensive, which drives more opportunity. People go there because it's like, okay, I can make more money. You can't have 1.6 million realtors doing the same amount of business and not have, am I making any sense here? Like, I feel like a lot of this might also have to do with the amount of people that came into the business that drove a lot of this change at the same time.
Some of that. I mean, when this is a boom and bust industry, and we're just coming off a long boom.
Yeah, right.
Boom. And so you have a lot of people come in, and as you said correctly, James, there's going to be a lot of people over the next things. I mean, I'm watching. I'm in a bunch of Facebook groups. I'm watching people posting like,
attrition's going to be huge.
Yeah. So there's some other things I'm sure we're going to talk about today that will accelerate some of that. So it's a boom and bust industry, and when we're booming, money flows in, investments flow in, and new things get built quickly. And we're not the only one. This time, it wasn't just the brokerage industry building new stuff. It was the finance industry, it was mortgage servicing, all of that side said, hey, we're going to put a bunch of money into developing infrastructure for real estate. And so that's really in the prior phase. That's what was the game changer. They showed up and said, you know what, we're going to make a lot of things a lot easier. And that stuff doesn't go away just because, iBuying didn't work
out. Right.
That stuff doesn't go away. That stuff still got built. And it's still there, and will still be used, right? So, so that's it.
So let's dive in. Let's give us some of the things that you're watching. I'd love to hear your view on, and we'll try to get through like the top 5.
Top trend. So top trend we wrote about in the Trends Report was the compensation lawsuits and their impact on how everybody on the buy side gets paid, and it's going to influence everything. So regardless of the outcome of the lawsuit, how much they go to one side or the other, we think this is going to mean a change in how our industry talks about buyer compensation. It already has. I mean, NAR has already said, hey, we're going to concede a whole bunch of things to make the buyer commission more transparent. And from our research, we don't think that's done. We think there's going to be more changes that are going to put right at the front how we talk to consumers about what a buyer's agent does and how they're compensated. And so where buyer's agents are going to have to be a lot better at talking about what they do and how they get paid and how they're going to guarantee they get paid enough to make it worthwhile, right?
So to put you on the spot, are you in the camp of you think we're going to lose the lawsuits or win the lawsuits? If you can answer that. Or somewhere in the middle. I'll give you now. Somewhere in the middle.
It's a tough call. I would say I'm trending that there will be some losses in these lawsuits. I don't think they're going to win on all counts, but I think there's some areas where the industry is not going to fare well.
And where do you think it ends up? Separation of comp? Do you think that's going to be a world where buyers are comp? Okay.
Great question. There's a spectrum of results, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've well crossed over the one end of the spectrum is just better disclosure that's required on the front end.
Which they should be doing anyway, by the way. Everybody should be getting an exclusive contract with a buyer. If you can't ask them for it or convince them to do it, then get a new job. Like, you need to think better about it.
Yeah. So that I feel like is a given. I think
it's foregone conclusion.
Mandatory disclosure on the front end.
Some states already require it anyway.
Some
so,
do.
yeah.
And I think that's less scary. Still requires you to talk about your compensation on the front end. You still have to clarify that. And then I think on the far end of the spectrum is, hey, everybody pays for their own services. So seller pays their agent for their services, buyer pays their. That's pretty extreme. And as we all know, creates a lot of pressure on first-time home buyers or demographics that just they can't afford to pay out of pocket for the services. They need it financed in order to do the transaction. So I believe, and I think we believe from our research, we're going to land towards that end of the spectrum, but where sellers are still able to offer compensation in order to sell the home. Because if you're selling to a first-time home buyer demographic, then you're going to need to offer to cover.
Totally.
If you have that, if you have that first trade-up listing, right? Yeah. Where you bought your first-time home buyer house and now you're ready to trade up to the next one.
But it does mean on the buy side, either buyers agents are just going to need to accept lower comp, just accept it, or they're going to get better at talking about what they do and how they earn the money that they are paid with their clients, so that their clients will make them whole or pay them what they're worth on their side of the transaction if not enough money is offered by the seller.
Do you think that NAR should be focusing on legislative changes to allow the buyer's agent compensation to be financed in the loan?
I think that's a foregone conclusion. I think that's a foregone conclusion. I think there will have to be financing changes in order to enable first-time home buyers or eligible buyers. They don't have the income in order to pay an agent out of pocket in order to finance that. I think we're going to have to do it. I think it's a good thing. I think we do it now. I mean, it's part of the cost of doing business now. So it's really not a net change. But in this scenario, they would need to pass some additional rules to allow that. I don't think the banks want to do it, but I think that's something that could be lobbied for.
Well, that's my point. It's like we've got Plan A, and Katie and her team are doing an amazing job of trying to fight these suits. And I'm sitting here going, and I think I said this on that stage at the event, was like, hope is not a strategy. We need a plan B and C, which is, okay, how do we position our industry so that if these things did occur, that the agent, can do a better job of articulating value. And then there's ways for the buyer, which could be, to Keith's comment, we've talked about this privately as well. Like the seller can still offer the ability to do that. It's going to be very interesting, by the way, and I don't want to stick on this topic too long, but how the agent has that conversation with the seller to say, you can offer compensation, but I can't. And like that's a whole change in conversation they're going to have to get used to. Yep. Which I feel like there's going to be potentially some gray area there that could get into trouble. So I'm just, as I think through this, I'm just kind of going, what does this new world look like?
Everybody's going to need some
retraining
on how to do this. And we've done a good job. Our listing agents do a great job of saying, here's all the things I do. Here's how I earn what I get paid. We've just not done it with the buyer's agents.
Right.
So I'm not even sure I believe this, but I'll just take this side for the auspices of a thoughtful discussion. I mean, isn't the industry relative? Like, if you have a willing buyer and a willing seller, it usually works out, right? Yeah. Like, so I know we get paid to worry. That's all of our jobs, right? And so that's fine. But isn't some percentage of this just smart people hand-wringing about? There will be changes in how this happens, but if you have a willing seller and a willing buyer, it's going to work itself out.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm not questioning that. I think. And Jack, you can step in here. I don't think our industry is prepared to ask for compensation, and I think you'll see pressure on commissions, which will affect MLS's, associations, brokerages.
But they will figure it out.
Keith, it's not the fall that kills you.
Yeah.
Well, it's hitting the ground.
It's when you hit the ground. That's what. Because we have 1.6 million agents, and probably
there'll be fewer of them. Yeah.
Of those on the buyer agent side, I will make the assertion that the vast majority of them have not been trained to discuss their value proposition. And
what do you mean by buyer's agent, though? Most of good agents,
agent that principally works with buyers, where a significant portion of their business is working with buyers.
So usually that's newer, right? So
usually,
or big teams, big teams. Yeah,
sure, yeah. So if you're a buyer's agent on a team, but I mean the teams control the lead flow. I guess I feel like this gets so much attention, and it should. I understand the impact of all of this. But I also think that there's been so many tidal waves that have come at this industry. But usually what it boils down to is the human being who wants to buy it and the human being who wants to sell it. And we try to do all these things to make it more complicated and get in the way of it or tweak it or change it, whether it's internally or externally through rules, regulations, and all of the other stuff. But magically, we always find a way. If there's a willing buyer and a willing seller, it works itself out.
I've got one final point on this. So the Canadians had some similar challenges in Ontario, and they had to change some rules. And I talked to them about it. I said, how was it? Because they have to do the disclosure on the front end and the fees and all this kind of stuff. They have to talk about their value proposition. And I talked to the brokers there, and they said, oh my gosh, it was like a year of freak out while we all got used to it. And then we got used to it and we moved on. And so I think your point is valid. Your point is valid, but it's going to take there's a lot of people in this industry.
Yes.
And it isn't so much that it's not so.
I guess I hear this topic getting talked about, the numbers in the industry and the people in it, and almost like it's causal instead of correlative, right? And I don't believe necessarily that it says like we needed to shake up in the agent count anyway. And the downward pressure on the market will shake some people out, and this will shake some people out. And the inability to process the pace of change or the acceleration, I think is your internal buzzword report, right? Like all of that will be part of it.
By the way, I've never thought it was bad for the industry.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't say that actually. And
this is bad for the industry because those who remain will be better salespeople.
But what does that look like? I mean, let's keep going because we got a lot of stuff to cover. Does it cause consolidation in your opinion? Not just agent count. I'm talking about holistically the brokerage industry, MLSs, associations.
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Of course it does. Because if you're an organization that becomes good at this, you will attract people from organizations that are not. Yeah. And it will drive consolidation actually also in MLS because they're not going to have the resources. If you're a small MLS, you don't have the resources to fight off a lawsuit. And so you want to be part of a bigger team that gets it done right.
All right. So let's put a bow on this thing. Basically, change is coming. Learn how to articulate your value to a buyer, which ironically is not hard to do if you think about how much work goes into it.
Right.
Get a contract signed to work exclusively.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some changes, and we'll figure out, to Keith's comment, and I agree with him. He and I have this conversation a lot, by the way. Very different perspectives, but that there will be an end where it's probably some consolidation, but I think at the end, the agents that are here will be better and will be able to articulate value better. And I think the industry will become more professional. So
yeah, it'll be the Wild West for 18 months. They'll be the quick and the dead, right?
Sure.
Those who adopt quickly and the rest will go away.
All right, let's go to the next one. What do you got?
So we're looking at what's happening in the MLS industry a lot right now. And this is another one where, an overnight success takes 10 years, 15 years, maybe 15 years in this industry, but it takes some time. And most brokers, a lot of agents are not aware, but there's been not just consolidation, MLS is coming together, although that's still happening. That's still going on. And I think the trend we just talked about is going to drive some of that.
Sure.
At the same time, a lot of these larger, mid-sized to large MLSs have been learning how to work together to share data, to share services, to create a better value proposition. Because as smaller, most MLSs are actually very small companies. They're like running a few $1 million, most of them, and it's just not enough money to deliver the kind of services that you can do if you're at a larger scale, right? And so there's been a lot of work happening in the background between MLSs to make it possible to do, to have access to a broader array of data, to do your searches over a larger area, to set up your clients to do searches over a larger area, to have access to, better customer support, more products, that kind of thing. So that's been happening. And it's reaching a boiling point now where we're seeing these national collaborations. There's over 900,000 agents and realtor members that are involved with an MLS that has some kind of collaboration with other large MLSs. That's either a data share, shared services, shared technology, shared backbone, something like that, that is moving us towards, I'm not going to say a national MLS, but I might say things like national IDX.
Sure.
Or maybe a very, very large area over which you get to use a front end of choice. And maybe you can do, you work primarily in New York and New Jersey, but you also work with your customers down in Florida.
Yeah.
Because you have customers that are moving down there, and you can set them up on searches and help them, find. And then
so the scarcity mindset is starting to go away a little bit. Basically, it's more about abundancy and thinking about how we can collaborate and work closer together.
Yeah, so that's a big one. We're tracking that one.
There's also a lot of money coming out of MLSs. I mean, they're investing in a lot of stuff, like actual companies. They're dumping money into being an investor in prop tech, which I found interesting too. So.
More and more. That's the other part. That's one of the collaborations. Is a lot of the MLSs getting together and saying, "Hey, let's pool our resources, and use that to acquire or build strategic technology, so we can control our destiny a little bit more." And it's already been happening. Again, these are things that average broker
doesn't know about.
Doesn't know. A lot of the MLSs you're running on today. The MLS has already taken back the database. They run the database on their own systems, and they're doing that. You're just using the front end provided by CoreLogic, Paragon, or whatever, right? So that's happening. So that's going to continue to happen. I think that's a good thing. That is better services, larger service areas. I mean, we've got 49 MLSs here in Texas. It's too many.
Yeah,
to do business here in Central Texas, I got to join 7. It's crazy.
Yeah. Everything's bigger in Texas, even.
I feel like this is a conversation as long as I've been in the business. We've been talking about consolidation. When I started, it was like 1,000. We're down to below 600 now. So it's been
it's like 526, I think.
Yeah.
So right around.
And really, for the person who's doing transactional real estate or owning and operating a brokerage, the biggest impact is going to be you're going to have more tools than you've ever had from your local MLS, right? Like they're going to either have to get bigger and better, or they're going to go away too, similar to the agent conversation we just had.
Yeah. And that's another one. I would be remiss if we didn't touch on kind of the macroeconomics and housing inventory and supply and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
I follow a lot of people on Twitter who are real idiots about this stuff. There are some I candidly ignorant conversations happening online about, it's
on
like,
Twitter. Really?
Imagine that.
Never happened.
They're rooting for a housing crash. People rooting for a housing crash. And it's like, you know what? Those are bad. Like, that's not something we don't want. That level of price instability in the market. I understand affordability is an issue. That's not what I'm talking about. But people rooting for, a 25 or 30%, they're like, we want to do 2008 all over again. I'm like, you're crazy. That's our economy. We've never recovered. We've not recovered from that. We're still.
There are better ways to solve the affordability problem than that sort of
100%.
Armageddon. Yeah,
100%. So just if you're listening, these are important facts. We have still not recovered from the prior Great Recession in terms of building enough houses for the demographics that want to buy houses. We're just nowhere near. There's still more demand than there is supply. Even at the higher interest rates, there's still more demand. And you can see it. I mean, we're recording this in early May. Go look at some of the charting of prices and price. There are areas where we're in a price recovery now, where prices are coming back up. There's multiple offers, and I'm not, again, this isn't to say woohoo, we're in multiple offer situations again in some markets. It's to say that the market is not in a situation that it's so fragile it's going to fall off a cliff and everybody should just hang out and wait for the end times. That's not where we are today. That's just not it. And that fundamentally what we've done is we've returned to a baseline of people that need to sell their homes because they need to move. They've had
life situations,
job change. They've had these are all fundamentals. This is returning to the fundamentals of why people move. They had a baby. They're getting divorced. They're doing all this stuff. Those are still going to happen. We're going to have 4.5 million transactions happen that are based on needs that people have. In our industry, you can go out and make plenty of money working with those people, and that's what's to get tuned in on. And who cares that we had a 6.5 million peak of
outlier? By the way, an outlier, a wild outlier. Yeah.
Who cares? Yeah, who cares? And so the message is, it's back to basics. It's pay attention to your network, pay attention to what's happening and going on. Don't believe the doom and gloom. There's plenty of opportunity here. And I just
question for you. I was on an investor call, not for anything other than I do a bunch of stuff sometimes for Wall Street people, and they were asking, when do we get to the 6.1 million units again? I was like, never. We're so far off from that. That's a very one-off situation. So let me phrase the question differently then, Jack. When do we get back to our normal roughly 5.3 million units that we do annually? Do you think it's 2024, 2025? No. What's your thoughts?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I'll do my best. So my sense of it is we're in an election cycle right now. And that's where we are. I think we are going to be in this kind of a market right now, all the way up through the election, because what businesses want and what people want is stability. Clarity. They want clarity. They want certainty. They want to know what are the policies, how, hey, it isn't about I do or do not like whoever's rules. I just want to know what the rules are, right? And if you know what the rules are, you can plan. And I think businesses want that clarity. I think employers want that clarity. Everybody wants that clarity. So I think we're going to be in a market like that right now for probably until the election, until it's like, here's what's going to happen. Yeah. Unless something crazy cataclysmic happens.
Oh, don't say that. Just
I know.
Yeah.
I've got a caveat, right?
I've got a follow-up that I hear a lot, and I'm curious your thoughts or if you've got research behind it. But this concept that people are now interest rate stuck in their home, right? Mm-hmm. So if someone has 3% and rates are 5.5 or 6.5 or whatever they happen to be, that I think it's probably true. Some percentage won't sell, right? Maybe because the math doesn't line up. Sure. But how much do you think that is a forward pressing issue or determinant for why someone makes a sell my home decision?
The low interest rates cause people to move their purchasing up to take advantage of the rates. Mm-hmm. It caused them to be a little bit more opportunistic. I know, you guys probably know people that worked in second home markets that did incredibly well during that period, because it's like, hey, I can get a low rate and buy a second home in a place I like to visit. And a lot of people bought homes to do Airbnb with. Right. And it was opportunistic. It was opportunistic because of the rates. So I think that obviously that opportunism is out of the market. It probably moves transactions up or created some level of demand. I'm not going to say it's a huge level, but some level of demand.
Sure, some percentage.
If I can get money for cheap, I'm going to use it. Right. So it probably did some of that. But I think the fundamentals of I'm downsizing. I don't need a house this big, and it's mostly paid for anyway, right? Or I'm in like I think people will, if their life situation changes materially, I don't think the interest rates are that huge of an obstacle.
I agree.
There will be some people that say I'm just going to stick here because I'm stuck on that, but I think most people are not looking at their interest rate every day and thinking about it. Most people are thinking about their life. They're thinking
I agree with you. I think it'll be the stated reason more often than it's the actual reason, right? The actual reason is the timing in the life hasn't arrived yet, it's just sexy to brag about my 2.9% interest rate that I've got, right? Like you just can't help yourself.
If that's sexy, wow.
These people lead a life because they do.
I think that's a really good point that I want to put a flag on, though. That pull forward effect, right? We usually do 5.3. We did 6 point whatever million. That's a million transactions more that would have probably happened later were interest rates, people working from home at a rate that they've never, like there was sort of this collision, this colliding of external forces that pulled a bunch of deals forward in the timeline.
Totally.
And now we're experiencing, the
they made their move. Obviously we all know the pandemic obviously played into that as well. All right, we got about 5 minutes. I want to get a couple more in here, Jack. So give us number 4 and 5 on your thoughts.
So I think the other one, we wrote about it in this year's report. We talked about what's happening in the technology space. So we gorged on technology during the boom time. We really did. We gorged on it. People bought all kinds of stuff. There were a lot of companies that, probably in a tighter market wouldn't have come into existence. And what we're going through, the technology demographic in our industry, the service providers that serve it, they're going through the same contraction right now, and they're having some of the same pain. It's a little different for them, but it's not, materially they're connected to the industry. And I think right now is where people are reevaluating their technology, what they really need, what really works for them. And so we're calling it like the day after the party's over.
And, you mean the hangover?
Yeah, you need to clean up a little bit. And so that's another trend we're seeing. We're talking to a lot of brokerages and some large teams that we do work with that are looking at how they work with their tech. So that's a trend currently.
You think there's going to be a lot of consolidation? Is that kind of what you're hinting at?
Absolutely. It's already happened. It's already happened. We had some of it happen during the peak of the market, and now we're seeing a lot of the companies that didn't quite get to their profitability, didn't quite get to the level of revenue they needed to. They're doing a down round in financing. They're talking to their peers and saying, hey, maybe we team up and merge and build a bigger company, or we sell.
Certainly venture capital got really tight, especially after, and we had a whole episode on this, but especially on Silicon Valley Bank and everything that happened after the fact. So, I think it reminds me a little bit of 2000 and I want to say like 8-9, when, after the market completely shifted, every brokerage was like, cut everything that we do not absolutely need. And there was a lot of consolidation in the space, which probably, to your point, it's needed because there's so much prop tech there that's just like, I like to look at it, Keith and I have these conversations where it's like, is this a need to have or a nice to have? And then what does this actually contribute to our bottom line? And certainly, all of my peers are certainly having those discussions.
Jack, how would you advise an owner of a brokerage, big or small, who's trying to evaluate technology in this space right now? Like, give us like a couple sentences.
A few things to do. First of all, do an inventory. Just do an inventory and go through, see what you got, see what you're paying for it, and then look at utilization. How much is it being used? And is it something that, is it a core tool? Do you just have a few people using it? Get a sense of
the lay of the land, a real lay of the land.
Yeah, get a sense of the lay of the land. So we always tell people start with that. And then, we recommend then looking at, what is if it's not being used, find out why it's not being used. Is it not being used because it's just was kind of an experiment? You didn't put your full weight behind it, or it's not a very good tool or not a very good product? Or do you need to, should it get used more? And now you need to really get people into training, and because it adds some efficiency in your business and it is a good tool, like really determine the reason why a piece of technology is not working in your business. I think there's a real urge. People come to us and they're kind of coming to us just for permission to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And we have this, and they'll name like a top tier technology company everybody would know. They'll say, we've got this and we just want to get rid of it. We're like, people like that in other companies, and use the heck out of it. We don't understand why you want to throw it out. So help us understand how. Are you communicating about it? So I think you need to give it now's a good time to do a good hard look. Get rid of your old stuff. Get rid of your home built stuff that's not serving you very well. Get rid of that one thing where you've got two agents that just love it, but they don't love it enough where they pay for it themselves, and you're just paying for them because you don't want to piss them off. Have that conversation.
Right.
If they love it so much, get them to
lead.
Pay for it.
Lead. You got to lead.
Sure. So that's kind of the mindset. But find out why it's not working, and then make a decision and pull the trigger.
Okay. All right.
Pull the trigger so you get the money back.
What's the last one? What's the other one?
So I think, gosh, I've got so many I want to talk to you guys about. So we write about brokerage business models a lot.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about it earlier that, there's some of these new companies, like 10 of the top 20 companies are kind of newer companies in the industry. And that trend appears to be continuing, where those companies are going to continue to get bigger and more powerful because they've been built on the new stuff. Then with maybe a different business model, maybe a leaner, meaner business model. We think the middle is going to continue to get squeezed, right? And then this is going to show up different places. If you're a high value model where you do a lot of stuff for your agents and you got a lot of value you deliver, very hands-on, you run as a kind of a boutique, or you do things for agents that really helps them get business done, really helps them close transactions, do more deals, all that kind of stuff. I think you're fine. You're fine. That works. You just charge for that value. Yeah. Whether it's referral fees or your split or your comp plan, you charge for that value, and people stick around because they want the good stuff. They want great marketing. They want the support. They want it. They're willing to pay for it because they don't want to do it, and they don't want to hire somebody to do it. It's just not their skill set. So that's fine. And on the other end of the spectrum, you're inexpensive to operate. People could come in, they could do transactions at a low fee. There's not a lot of services, but they're mostly self-sufficient. That model works like that. And those are companies that are growing very, very fast right now. I think it's the middle where people haven't really picked, we're going to be inexpensive,
one or the other.
Transactional, or we're going to be value,
full service,
full service based. We're gonna charge for the value we supply. And there's a spectrum in there. I'm not trying. It's not black and white, but you really need to have an orientation to the business and say, you know what, we're gonna do 2 or 3 things really well, and we're gonna charge for it in our compensation plan, right? Like that's an important stand to make. Say, look, we're good at marketing. We're good at transaction support. We're good at generating referral leads for our agents. Like we're going to do those 3 things really well, and people are going to pay us for that, right? Great. That's awesome. Go do that and do it hard, right? Because it's the middle where it's a little fuzzy, where the agent's
trying to be everything to everybody.
I'm not sure what value I'm getting, and I feel like I'm overpaying. I could get less here. Because if you're in the middle, you're going to get eaten by the high value people who are going to give people all that service.
You're going to get eaten by both sides.
And by the people they're saying I'm transactional and inexpensive. You don't have to pay me very much money. You can run your business over here. And that's the challenge, I think, is people need to position.
So a lot of it's a great comment, because I think it's fair to say a lot of the old guard fits in that middle spot. And there's a lot of, and they're all being picked at currently by some of these other companies as it is. I think it's interesting. It's funny because I've always told people, if you lead with your comp, there's always going to be somebody cheaper in the market. Yeah. And as an industry, I've always found that to be very true, because if somebody only joins you because of your comp, they're going to leave because there'll be a better comp. And I mean this just from a historical perspective. I just worry that that's a track that makes the industry less professional. It's my own personal view, but it's interesting to your comment though, that it's like, you can see it. The companies that do value really well, they charge higher splits, and agents are happy to pay for it. So they're like, I find value in this. And then there's, they lead with whatever this, we're just, you can see it when agents go, the first question they ask is, what's the split? It's like,
you're in the wrong, you're typically in the wrong conversation with that.
Right. Yeah.
You can really see it with the teams, which I think the teams that provide a lot for their team members, they're at the extreme end of the value proposition scale. And it shows up their return on revenue, it can be 18 to 25% versus a broker who's lucky to be doing 7%, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing 7%, amazing, right? You're doing really well. But these teams are getting 20%, 25% return on revenue because of how much they provide, because of all the support and the leads and referrals and all that stuff drive into their system. So you can see it in an extreme where it's like they're doing quite well and have that. That's now you got to have capital to do it, but they're doing it well.
Do you think that there's going to be a movement, and we'll wrap up with this, do you think there's going to be movement more towards virtual? Do you think all of these brokerages are going to have to rethink their overhead?
I don't really think that. I think that virtual is a tool in everybody's tool bag now. I mean, we all went virtual during the pandemic.
Right. We all got that exercise.
And for some companies, it works well because of the nature of how they communicate, the nature of their leadership, all that. So, I think it's a tool everybody has access to. There's still, like I talked to Michael Saunders, who was at our
She's awesome.
summit.
Yeah.
Amazing. And she's like, you know what? We are all about being together. We're all about people in the offices. And the brokerage that I ran here in Austin with partners, we were about being together. And we had people come every day. It was a magical learning environment. You every day you probably learned what an agent learns in 10 weeks, right? Because we were all talking to each other all the time, listening to each other's phone calls. And so that in-person magic, if that's your jam, then I think that's still
stick with it.
Still a great proposition. There's agents that thrive in that. And they don't want to be trapped in their home office. They want to be out and with people. So I think virtual is a tool for everybody. People are using it at different levels. I don't think it means that every model that comes in has got to be virtual. You may have it as a component. You may use it. But the degree it fits your culture, your value proposition, your business model, the way you do things, I think varies a lot. This is an industry. We got a lot of options on the shelf for agents. There's a lot of different flavors for everybody. And so
said another way, I think, and I'm echoing what you said, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I think it will be more virtual, right? It's not binary. It's not virtual or brick and mortar. I think you will find this experience where the brick and mortar is becoming more virtual and the virtuals are doing more get together physically. Let's hang out. Let's spend time. Right. Yeah.
Well, I think there are some things fundamentally on virtual, and if you tip it over onto the staff side, one of the things we've learned is, your admin support doesn't have to be in your office in your town. You can do a lot of admin support centralized somewhere else that's less expensive. There's a lot of people using, teams in Nicaragua and South America and the Philippines.
Sure. Yeah.
We're seeing, and does your director of marketing have to come into the office every day? Could they be remote if they're really talented and skilled? Does your creative team need to be there? Probably not. Does your transaction coordination need to be there? Probably not. So I think people will absolutely leverage that, because I'm sorry, it's super cost effective. It allows brokerages have thin margins already. If I can take a $65,000 person and I can get the same level of service and support for $25,000, I'm doing it.
Yeah, totally.
I'm doing it. It's just how you get more efficient. So.
Jack, this has been awesome. Really insightful. And for everybody out there, we'll have a link to the Trends Report for you guys to get a copy of if you want to do that, and just grab a bottle of wine and dig deep, because it'll take you a while to get through it. There's some heady shit in there, but it's pretty amazing. But Jack, thanks for being on our show today. We really appreciate it. It was we'll have to have you back and share more of those viewpoints. So
it's been an absolute pleasure, and James and Keith, thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course.
Thanks, Jack.
Yes, we want you to subscribe to this podcast, but the good news is if you subscribe now, you'll never have to subscribe to any other podcast ever again.